Bonji Vacorja, welcome everybody. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat. Let me just check. It is 174, where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And you're all very, very welcome, whether you're watching this live or watching a recording. And as is customary, I start with a prayer for peace. Gomara Shiacon ar fud na crinne. Gomara Shiacon in our jaili agus in our jirha. Gunairi lin lenar cuid garmacha. Ganwich buichas jeev, je chivdaka, is spirit chivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities, for peace. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. That those who risk their lives each day for peace may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the holy mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. Anyway, you're all welcome. Let me see where you're. I know the first two here from New Zealand and Australia. I'm very impressed. The people come from so far away. That means getting up very, very early to be here. Berlin, where else? London, Wyoming, Eastleigh, Hampshire, Northamptonshire, Denmark, the New Forest. Lovely to see you all. Fort Worth, Texas, sun-kissed Ulster. You're very, very lucky, Pat. It's very, very dull here in Kilkenny. Warwickshire. Just lovely to see all this. Sunny Slough, Meath in Ireland, Bedford. Brilliant. Antrim. Lovely. So you're all very, very welcome. Well, we are going to the UK today, and let me introduce my guest this evening, and that is River Jones. River, you're so, so welcome.
Oh, it's so lovely to be by your fireside, Eimear.
And it's so long since we chatted, because the last time we actually had a conversation, I was on your podcast. How many years ago was that?
I think that was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I'm guessing. Time is strange, isn't it, recently? But yeah. I think it was pre-lockdown. I think it was, yeah.
Anyway, just lovely to chat to you again. So, tell us where you are.
I am in Brighton, where it has brightened up as the day has gone on here. It started off as a bit of a sort of grey, dull day, and I was very happy that the sun came out, especially as I was doing a burial service this afternoon, and it just is, it does make a difference to have beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. Well, of course, you're a funeral celebrant, but we'll talk about that later on. So tell us, in terms of your physical landscape, just describe Brighton for our viewers.
Okay, so I am. So Brighton is sort of in a valley, really. We're in the South Downs. And if you come through the kind of main road that runs into Brighton, well, there are 3 main roads that come. One comes sort of along the east, sort of past Lewes, where Philip Carr-Gomm lives. Mm-hmm. And then there's the sort of main road that runs along the coast. And then the road that sort of comes down, from London, it follows a path between 2 hills. So it's very hilly. I'm setting myself a bit of a goal to cycle up those hills a lot at the moment to keep myself fit. And it should be a river valley, but the water's deep underground. So there's a sort of aquifer. And I live quite close to that. And it's very built up. It's very intensively built up. So, there are many homes, you know, hundreds of homes within a few stone throws of me. But it's surprisingly quiet. I'm only a couple of streets back from the main road, but it's surprisingly quiet and peaceful here.
Wow.
And yeah, there's still kind of wild nature even in the city, you know.
Like what? Do you have foxes and?
We've got lots of foxes, loads and loads of herring gulls, of course pigeons. Yeah, I just love. I've been an urban druid, you know, for all the time. I've lived in Brighton for over 40 years now. You know, obviously ventured to other places now and then, but my home has really always been here. And yeah, I fall in love more and more with the nature that I can connect with in the city, as well as being always delighted to kind of get out, you know, into other beautiful places.
It's really interesting because, you know, I live in a rural area, and I never expected I would get in touch with nature in an urban area. I mean, I know there's foxes and things, and I've lived in the city for years, and I thought, and I never wanted to leave it. And obviously, you have parks and things. And it wasn't until I read Cassandra Eason's book, The Modern Day Druidess, and that's how I found Obod, actually. And she said you could be a druid, you know, in an apartment in a city, and you can have 4 pot plants, and that can be your grove. And I just opened my eyes. I said, oh my goodness. Yes, you don't have to be deep in the forest. Having said that, I just look out my window and I'm seeing trees. I don't see as many foxes here as I do when I go to Dublin.
Yeah.
So, and that's really, really interesting.
Country foxes are more wary of humans.
That's
A lot
right.
of people feed foxes in the cities now, and they're getting, yeah, they've changed. They have changed so much in the last couple of, you know, I don't know how many generations of foxes there are in a human generation, but say I've lived in Brighton for like a couple of generations now, you know. And yes, foxes used to still be kind of quite shy and flee humans, but they don't care at all now. Most of them have been fed by people as cubs, and they're, you
And
know,
funny, I think they're safer. They're safer in the cities because, you know, not many people keep chickens, and you know, they're the enemy of chicken owners in the country. So often you'll see farmers. Well, I have over the years, not recently. You'll find a dead fox hanging someplace, and that's there as a warning to other foxes. I just find that creepy, but because their chickens have been eaten, whatever. But they're safer in the city, which is really, really interesting.
yeah.
And I always find now I can hear them here. And actually, having said that, I haven't seen one on my land, but I know I have a ruined tower on my land, and I see this hole, and sometimes I can smell the fox. I don't see them, and I find that fascinating. But I love that haunting, shrieking,
Yeah.
uh, banshee type shriek or call
Yeah.
of fox.
I love that. I love that as well. I love when I hear that wild sound in the city at night as well. Yeah. I love it. One time, a couple of years ago, there's a big, beautiful alder tree near my house. Really beautiful, mature alder tree, which tells you straight away that there is underground water, because alders
They
like
like water,
with
yeah.
their roots in the water, and it is such a big, mature, thriving tree. It clearly has its roots in the water. And where I live, there used to be a brewery here. And the brewery was here because this was where there were the artesian wells, you know, the water that was sort of bubbling up from the aquifer. So this alder tree's got its roots there, and it just sort of kept calling to me. And I went and did an all-night vigil under it a couple of years ago on Midsummer's Night, you know, and I just thought, oh, you know, it was so amazing actually to do that, and to be right in the, you know, in this very kind of urban, where I've sat underneath this tree, there's some big blocks of flats. So I was probably literally looked over by hundreds of windows. Had people been wanting to look out of their windows and see me. And it took quite a while for it was a Sunday night that year. So it took quite a while for the whole kind of human world to subside. And then when it did, then all the foxes came out, and they came very close, and quite. Some of the bolder ones were quite curious, and there was one that was obviously a vixen with cubs squirreled away somewhere, who was like coming and going. Someone had put some half thrown some food into the bin so that it was around, so there was some really good pickings. And so I was seeing all this sort of come and going, and then she was really wary of the dog fox whose territory it was, and it was just so cool to kind of see all this goings on.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the alder, occupies a liminal space, both
Yes.
being comfortable with what, in water and on land, and that, and adding to that magic to had a vigil there, and then looking at that other liminal between wild and the urban and how they interface. I just think it's just a double experience of this world and the other world, and then the wild world and the urban world, and then above and below, and beautiful. Hounds of Howgate says, old sayings have been forgotten, sadly. Plant one for the deer and grow one for the fox. Oh, interesting.
Nice. Okay. Plant one for the deer, grow one for the fox. I'm wondering what we're going to grow for the fox. That sounds like grow an animal, or grow a rabbit, or grow a chicken. I don't know, because foxes. I don't know. What would you grow for a fox?
Well, I don't know. I was thinking of just at first thing, and I thought, is it 2 trees? Because the deer will probably eat one.
Okay.
And the foxes don't. Do they burrow? Do badgers burrow, beneath old trees, not young trees? I mean, not doing damage and things. They're sets. Are foxes' lairs sometimes? I don't know.
Yeah.
But the foxes shelter within old trees.
Yeah. But foxes will often adopt someone else's abandoned home, won't they? Or just sort of find and when I say someone else, I mean like
Another animal.
set or something, but possibly someone else, as in someone human else as well. But yeah, there are all kinds of good sort of bushy bits around here, and things that they can get underneath, and yeah.
Brilliant. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you found Druidry and how you came to Obod.
Okay, where to begin? I knew you were going to ask me about how I came to Obod, so I've been thinking a little bit about this. And when I think, where did this begin? It goes all the way back, as I think it probably does for most of us, to a sort of feeling of a deep connection with nature and some kind of connection with the more than human world, some sort of sense of this more than human world that goes back to childhood. And yeah, I grew up. I was what's charmingly called an army brat. Well, I've when we talk about liminal things, actually, I wasn't that all the way. I always feel like I'm kind of quite in liminal space in all sorts of ways, and always have been. I was actually born by the seaside in Folkestone, but my dad was in the army, and age of 5, we moved to Germany. We were a year in an army camp over there, a British Army base that's no longer, and then back to what's called the Guards Depot in a village called Purbright in Surrey, which was, to me, it was just the sort of normal place where I lived, because wherever you live is normal, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
You don't think that there's anything at all odd about the fact that all your neighbours have identical furniture and crockery that's MOD issued.
Yes.
That's the life you live, and that you're surrounded by soldiers. Everyone's dad is a soldier, and when you're playing out, you always ask, "What rank is your dad?" And my dad's a sergeant. And yeah, but it's all surrounded by woodlands, so yeah, there was lots of kind of playing out in the woods, and yeah, I can just remember how much I loved that, and how much I was sort of attracted to certain trees, and I just loved being up trees, and loved going blackberrying, always had kind of really strong sense of things that felt timeless to me. And blackberrying was probably one of the first ones that sort of gave me that feeling of doing sort of some sort of sense of my, people have been doing this forever and ever. But yeah, my mum died when I was quite young, 5 in fact, and I'd been brought up going to Sunday school, Church of England. Started taking myself off to church as a kind of primary school age child, and an army church, so that was a whole other thing there as well. And then various different sort of permutations of that. And then my stepmom went and worked for some Christian Scientists, and they wanted to take me to their Sunday school. So, I had a whole kind of little foray into Christian Scientists, in my kind of crossover years, primary to secondary school. Joined the Christian Union at secondary school because we had this wonderful RE teacher called Miss Brownrigg, who taught everyone's mums. And she was just this like amazing kind of Willendorf Venus type woman with a bosom the size of a bus who made these. She made the most amazing flapjack I've ever tasted in my life, and homemade fudge, and she could have lured us all to Jesus with her goodies. I went off on the RE field trip. There was a evangelical vicar there who said, no, if you really want to be Christian, you've got to kind of be born again and all that. So through all that kind of thing, met some really lovely people, a couple of teachers from my school who were involved in this church and youth group actually, who were really crucially fantastic people for me through a quite difficult kind of teenage years. And then came down to university here in Brighton. So I'm one of many that came here as a student and stayed. Came to study philosophy and literature. And one of the first courses that I did in my first year was a course called The Bible in English Literature. And all of a sudden, I was kind of at university, kind of getting all this kind of critical thinking, and kind of like, it felt like the scales dropped from my eyes, and it's okay. I've kind of always known this deep down. This is a cultural product, this thing, that's presented as the word of God, and it's got a whole history of people deciding what went in it and what didn't. And there are stories of the flood, and there are other flood stories in other cultures, and that it just and so during that time, I vividly recall actually my first summer after my first year writing my first sort of big long philosophy essay, which was, I think therefore I am. What, if anything, is implied by this question? And I had to write 2,000 words about this. And as I was kind of pondering this, it's like, okay, I can't, I don't actually, in my core believe any of this stuff that actually has been a comfort and a aid to me and a connection with something. But it's, it dropped away, and I think that there was something in me that was a bit lost and a bit scared. And then another couple of years of wild university shenanigans, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that kind of thing. And then I did a PGCE, postgraduate certificate in education, and while still doing that, I became pregnant with my now 36-year-old son, who's a father of 2. And yeah, so suddenly I was like a single mum living in Brighton with my little boy, and discovered a really great local community centre where there was yoga classes, learned some yoga, heard that there was even better yoga class at the Buddhist centre, so I started going to yoga at the Buddhist centre. And then they did meditation classes as well with a free creche. So anything with a free creche, I was going. So I, I I learned meditation. They used to teach two meditations. They used to teach the Metta Bhavana, which is the meditation of universal loving kindness, which, shall I say a bit about that? I love it's such a lovely practice. For
Please
anyone.
do.
So the Metta Bhavana, Metta is the unconditional love, the unconditional, universal unconditional love. And the way that I was taught it was, in order to be able to give this, you have to start with yourself.
Yeah, of course.
Complete opposite of Christianity. You need to give this to yourself first. You need to fill your own cup so you've got something to give. So you first generate this feeling to yourself, holding yourself with loving kindness and compassion. And then you bring into your mind somebody else for whom you have naturally a positive regard, and hold them in your heart, with may they be well and may they be happy. And then you bring into your mind someone to whom's fairly neutral, maybe the person who serves you in the local shop, or, someone you don't know, you pass on the street, you just bring them. And then you think of somebody to whom you are positively disposed, and you bring them into your mind and your heart, and you generate equally, they too are deserving of love and compassion. And then in the final stage, you bring all four of these together: yourself, the people you love, the person you love, the person you're neutral towards, and then you generate this feeling equally to all, and then you expand it out to the people near you in the room with whom you're meditating, your city, your country, your world. So it's a beautiful practice. So I loved learning that meditation, and also just the mindfulness of breathing. I wasn't really interested in Buddhism for some reason. It just wasn't something that drew me. And I carried on always just sort of having this feeling of, I like a lot of us, I was always like a kind of picking up certain stones and falling in love with them, and carrying
Yes.
them in my pocket, or like taking them home and making little arrangements of them here and there, or gathering loads of pine cones and hanging them from my ceiling, or just, I don't know, just and oh god, I always have so loved the sea. I've always so loved the woods, and yes, that was pulling me more and more also. And then I got into I used to be a teacher of creative writing, and I used to run creative writing workshops in the community. That's what I sort of was doing in my 20s. And there was this beautiful poem by an American poet called Carl Sandburg, who wrote around the time of the turn of the century. And there's this poem called Wilderness. And he speaks about all the different animals that are within him. During our chat, if we've time. So I used to love working with this poem as a kind of inspirational tool, and then inviting people to think about what was within them, and how they could describe different parts of themselves as different creatures. And
do you have it there?
I can get it there. I haven't got the book to hand, but I can get it up. Let me find it. Okay. Excuse if there's tapping.
As you're doing that, I'll see Ricky's a bit disappointed. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. This was on the syllabus. Why was my uni not offering this? I'm sorry, Ricky. You can't have it all. This River was lucky. She went to the right university. Yes.
Okay.
And just somebody, what do you grow for fox? Foxgloves for foxes keeps the little paws warm. So, and also if you eat blackberries too. So interesting.
Shall I read this poem?
Please do.
By
Please
Carl
do.
Sandburg. There is a wolf in me, fangs pointed for tearing gashes, a red tongue for raw meat, and the hot lapping of blood. I keep this wolf because the wilderness gave it to me, and the wilderness will not let it go. There is a fox in me, a silver grey fox. I sniff and guess. I pick things out of the wind and air. I nose in the dark night and take sleepers and eat them and hide the feathers. I circle and loop and double cross. There is a hog in me, a snout and a belly, a machinery for eating and grunting, a machinery for sleeping satisfied in the sun. I got this too from the wilderness, and the wilderness will not let it go. There is a fish in me. I know I came from salt blue water gates. I scurried with shoals of herring. I blew water spouts with porpoises before land was, before the water went down, before Noah, before the first chapter of Genesis. There is a baboon in me, clambering clawed, dog-faced, yawping a galoop's hunger, hairy under the armpits. Here are the hawk-eyed hankering men. Here are the blonde and blue-eyed women. Here they hide, curled asleep, waiting, ready to snarl and kill, ready to milk, waiting. I keep the baboon because the wilderness says so. There is an eagle in me and a mockingbird, and the eagle flies among the Rocky Mountains of my dreams and fights among the Sierra crags of what I want. And the mockingbird warbles in the early forenoon before the dew is gone, warbles in the underbrush of my Chattanoogas of hope, gushes over the blue Ozark foothills of my wishes. And I got the eagle and the mockingbird from the wilderness. Oh, I got a zoo. I got a menagerie inside my ribs, under my bony head, under my red valve heart. And I got something else. It is a man-child heart, a woman-child heart. It is a father, a mother, and lover. It came from God knows where. It is going to God knows where. For I am the keeper of the zoo. I say yes and no. I sing and kill and work. I am a pal of the world. I came from the wilderness.
Oh, who's that by? I'm just going to put it into the chat.
Carl Sandburg, Sandberg.
Is it Carl with a K or a C?
With a C.
Beautifully read, just beautifully, just lovely, and there's lots of nice reaction to it. Also, just to come back, and I was thinking as you were talking about those 4 spheres of unconditional love: yourself, your lover, the person you're neutral to, and the person that you're not so enamored with. You know, I was thinking that is so akin to Druidry, and it's so important now because we can really get into hating the people that we're frightened of or who wish to do us damage or with whom we do not agree. And just Ricky makes the point, it sounds like a more explicit instruction guide to the Druid prayer for peace deep within the still center of my being. May I find peace silently within the quiet of the grove. May I share peace and gently within the greater circle of humankind. May I radiate peace. And that is a prayer. I say that every day. I say it as Gaeilge, in Irish, but I just love that prayer because you know what? It grounds me because it starts here. And once I have that deep, I'm not always peaceful within. Oh my God, I can go off on one. But that's not what I'm saying, is that but when I can find that place, I think the world is a safer place when I'm at peace with me.
Yes.
if we could all be at peace with ourselves and the world around us is a safer place. And I find
Yes.
it's such an anchoring prayer. And I imagine that exercise that you were doing, that practice, very much an anchoring
Yeah.
practice into peace and unconditional love. And I don't think that takes, I don't know, to say the Druid's prayer doesn't take long, or the peace prayer. You can say it over and over again. And and visualizing where you are, I think it's doable because sometimes meditation is difficult for people. I mean, when I
Yes.
first came across it, I mean, the teachers I had, oh, they were meditating for 2 hours, and I go, to hell with that, I'm never doing that. But I met a teacher said, if you could do it for a minute, then just do it for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
When you start doing the 30, then you do it a minute. And says, no, don't do any more. And then you want to do that little bit more. And all
Yeah.
of that, about these things that are possible. A beautiful poem, just beautiful.
Yeah. So where that comes into my story about finding Druidry
Go on.
is that after doing a workshop with this poem, somebody came up, one of the participants came up and said, so how long have you been into shamanism? And I said, I don't even know what shamanism is.
Yeah.
What's shamanism? And then this guy, we became friends, and he lent me John Matthews' book, The Celtic Shaman, and he took me along to a kind of first pagan ritual, which was very exciting to go to. It was a Beltane celebration somewhere in Oxfordshire, I believe. That was the first ceremony that I'd been at, where people were calling on the elements and directions, and it just felt like, oh yeah, this is where this is where I want to be. It just felt like just the right place. And not long after that, I went off on a big adventure to Australia, Indonesia and Australia. And I was going in search of that nature connection, really. Actually, I've lived most of my life now in the southeast of England, which is, you can't go anywhere in the southeast of England without seeing sodium glare in the sky and hearing traffic somewhere.
Mm.
And I just had this deep thirst in me to go and to be really immersed in deep nature. And I really found that in the southwest of Australia, where there are huge forests, the size of the whole of England, with these massive trees. And I had, that's where my name comes from. That's a whole other story, but I had an incredibly magical adventure, which I could probably talk for hours about the things that happened. But whilst I was there, I had an amazing kind of, it was an incredible experience to have had, actually, in the late 20th century. And it was only for a short while,
Mhm.
but I did have a glimpse for a short while, a few months, of not wearing a watch, not needing to look at a watch for anything. I was sort of out in this deep forest, in a quite with a random assortment of mostly Australian ferals, as they were called, people that had been anti-logging protests out there, and not needing to look at the calendar either, and having this experience of kind of being able to sort of sink into real time and be able to just, like, well, my sense of time of day is where is the sun, and my sense of time of the month, is where is the moon, and it was mostly clear skies. It was summertime there, spring, summer, and I got to know, like, I know where the moon's going to come up and when, and what its path's going to be, and just being so deeply connected with that day in and day out, and being in a place where there's a river called the Franklin River that apparently at some point in the late 19th or earlier 20th early 20th century, someone's, went up it, and they're talking about a lot, and it was declared a kind of national park, because it was one of the first national parks declared in Western Australia, I think, this beautiful place. So it was very untouched, and I had this sort of deeply transformative experiences there, and that connection with, I'd always, for a while before that, I'd had the moon colour, always been really drawn to the moon, as my dad always said, you were wired to the moon, as the saying goes. But I had this feeling while I was there, okay, when I get back home, I want to find some way of keeping this, and I want to have a full moon ceremony with the women, and 1996, before mobile phones, I would go to a call box now and then and make a call home, 5-minute call, with $1 in the slot, where I called my sister who's in Swansea. Again, there's a whole other tale there about me and my sister separated while we were growing up, found each other again as me as a young mother, when my son was a baby. Again, another tale for another day. But we all have had a kind of parallel things in our lives, and I called her and I said, oh no, when I get back I need to start the women's full moon ceremony, and she said, you'll never guess what's happened. I've just been invited to go to a women's full moon ceremony. She'd been invited by her Tai Chi teacher down in Swansea, who was an amazing lady called Ruth. I don't know what her surname was, but she had some kind of connection with the Hopi tradition of North America, Canada. And it was one of these examples of an unbroken lineage that have a tradition that they decide that it needs to be shared to help people reconnect with their own traditions in their lands, So I first moon back in the UK, I was down with my sister in Swansea, being introduced to this full moon ceremony, beautiful ceremony. And I was kind of gifted it, to bring back to Brighton, and it went through a few sort of different iterations, from me just sort of randomly inviting anyone and having at one point like a huge great big gathering, with way too many people, on the top of the hill near where I lived, to then it developing into something that was a kind of much more contained group of like a dozen or so of us, and then we decided to do some the solar festivals as well, to run some open rituals that anyone could come to on the solar festivals. So we did a Beltane ceremony on the side of Ditchling Beacon, which it's a big one of the high points of the South Downs that sort of towers above Brighton. There's a famous London to Brighton cycle ride that happens once a year, where the biggest challenge as people are on their way down from London is they have to sort of cycle up to the top of this hill, and when they get to the top, they can see the sea, on the other side.
Beautiful.
But we were on the northward side, where there's one of these. In many places in Britain, there are these kind of plateaus on the sides that have been levelled out. I wonder what for and by whom, but they've been levelled out on the side of the hill, and it was one of these places. We wild camped up there, and
beautiful.
And that was when I was first asked to do a ceremony, actually, for a hand fasting ceremony. I'd never even heard of hand fastings. But yeah, so I got into that, and somebody that I met through that, and then I met somebody through. Actually, she wasn't through the Moon group, but somebody else I met through my hairdresser, in fact, and through chatting about astrology. And he said, you must meet my friend Kate, who's into astrology as well. And she'd just joined OBOD. And so she told me about it. And then I thought, oh, that sounds great. And we went along to Dave and Kerry, one of their ceremonies. It was their autumn equinox ceremony up by the Long Man of Wilmington, another one of these hillside plateaus. And it was just, this is it was, the ceremony was held with such depth and magic, but also such unpretentious, down to earth ease, and it was the combination of those things that really pulled me in, and I just, I love this. This is, I want to find out more about this. And so it all started from there. That was, that first ceremony was the year 2000, just before I discovered that I was pregnant with my third son.
Ah.
Yeah. I went to my first OBOD camp with him in a sling and my second son in a pram, and then a massive rucksack on my back, and I went up the train.
Was your older boy with you as well?
My older boy was with me, who was like 11 or 12, and was
okay, so okay. A little bit more independent. Okay.
Where are you dragging me off to? What kind of, and what is this all about? What kind of hippie mayhem you taking to? We went through the sort of gating ritual of the camp, which, for anyone who doesn't know, there was this, the camp would always have like a gate bender, and there'd be somebody who'd be the gatekeeper, and when you arrived, before going into the camp, you just would need to sit at a gate, and you'd be made a cup of tea, and you'd sit by the gate fire, and you'd be what they call gated, so just,
I've never been, so this is lovely to hear this.
And put down that world that you've just come from and prepare to kind of enter a different kind of space. And came through the gate to be greeted by, the first person I remember meeting was the wonderful Raven. I don't know if anyone knows Hella Raven.
Yes, I know Hella from the Netherlands. Yes.
From the Netherlands, who was sort of,
she's very tall,
bare-breasted goddess appeared, and what great times. And Will kind of ran off and joined the feral teenagers, and Philip's daughters amongst them, and that was a big part of our life for the next, I guess, 7 or 8 years.
Alas, I never got to a camp. And when I hear about them, I think, oh my goodness, all the things I missed out. Anyway, that's just the way things are. Mm-hmm. So I just remember you and I met for the first time in 2014 at Earth Spirit, just outside Glastonbury, at a weekend on a celebrancy that Philip and Kathleen Matthews and a few others were. It wasn't a workshop. It was a weekend.
It was a kind of celebrants retreat, wasn't it?
It was. And I think, maybe we'd all done a bit of celebrancy, but that was a great weekend. And then I discovered that you were a funeral celebrant, and I know Howard, my husband, was dying then. He had cancer, but that was a wonderful weekend. And then you, a year later, did the first online, it's not the right word, but the funeral celebrancy one. And I remember, I think the platform you're using, was it Teachable or something? And my broadband here was so bad, and I kept being dropped out.
It was awful.
Really, really frustrated. But I got a lot from the course. And then you went on to do for OBOD, you do do you do
School of Celebrancy?
The School of Celebrancy.
Yeah.
So do you have a contact for that? Just so if anyone's interested.
Yeah, it's so schoolofcelebrancy.org. Yeah, so all the details are there. So it kind of, it was seeded, I think, at that weekend, and it wasn't necessarily the intention of it at all.
No, because I remember. So it's,
Yeah,
sorry, schoolofcelebrancy.org. That's it.
that's right. Yeah, all one word, schoolofcelebrancy.org. Yeah.
I remember Philip not wanting it, and I remember Gabby saying, "Philip, we need this."
We want, yeah, people. So Philip had invited a few of us who. So there was about 40 of us who all had some experience of
Yeah,
celebrancy and some interest in celebrancy. And there were a sort of handful of us, quite a small handful, for whom it was like our primary
yes,
way of working in the world. And Philip had invited, I think, 3 of us who'd each done a different kind of training as celebrants, as to talk about the training that we'd done. And there were also a couple of really interesting priests. There was
we had
Peter Owen Jones and Mark
Mark the
Townsend.
Townsend. Is it the
Yeah,
magician? Yeah, that was
yeah.
really interesting as well.
And then at the sort of final roundup, yeah, they're just, I do remember it being Gabby, but I mean, there just seemed to be lots of people saying, we want our own training, we want an OBOD training, you know, and because I live near Philip, I was getting a lift there and back with him, and on the way back we got talking there, and just, yeah, Philip was talking about the reasons why he'd always been reluctant to do any kind of like ordination kind of process within OBOD. And yeah, and then I remember sort of saying, well, yeah, it wouldn't necessarily need to be that, you know, you could have a training that was more along the lines of a kind of professional development.
That's right.
Training. Because this is sort of background that I had been from before celebrancy. I'd worked for 14 years at the University of Sussex, you know, developing various different courses, open access type of courses. And yeah, so it was just a chat. I wasn't thinking that I would be involved in doing it or anything. And then about 6 months later, I got a call from Philip saying, should we have a bit more of a chat about this, you know, celebrancy idea? And he kind of dragged me kicking and screaming into the world of online teaching, which, as you say, oh gosh, goodness, the technology has come a long way. It was something that doesn't even exist anymore, I think, but we were all like dropping in and out, and you know, we were, and it was
yeah. But it's wonderful. And then I was rooting through things, and I came across an ad, a flyer that had gone out that you and I were going to do a course on celebrancy for the order. This is before you did the other one. It was after the funeral one. We were going to do we remember that, but we didn't get enough.
Do a retreat, weren't we?
Yeah, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I just came across the flyer. I thought, oh my God, I remember that. But then, do you still have many people, members attending? Because somebody says, I've done River's funeral celebrancy course. Very, very good.
Yeah, thank you, Simone. Oh, nice to see you. Yeah, so we started off doing these kind of like webinar, you know, live webinar things where we'd have like 10 of us on the screen, you know, all kind of trying to drop in and out, and you know. And we ran this course. So we started off with Serving the Living and the Dead, which was a kind
of the one,
6-week course in funeral celebrancy, and then developed the second course, Celebrating Life, which is about weddings and namings and so on. And then after a year or two, Philip said, "Look, this is like what he said is this is like having a really kind of a book it's a really great book, but it's just in a kind of awful, tattered, you know, falling apart, all smudged pages. You can barely read it. You know, we need to do something different with it." And so we moved it again. I was sort of dragged kicking and screaming through this process. We moved it onto a sort of online platform where people could access it for themselves. So by a process of exposure, I completely overcame the fear of my own face on camera and the sound of my own voice. And we recorded these sort of video lessons, and written material, and we've got audio meditations and tasks that people do on their in the lesson, and discussion threads that people can join, and then we have a kind of face-to-face webinar that people drop in once a month. And then most importantly of all is that people have homework tasks to do, which that's where it really happens, is sort of doing these tasks where people kind of go through those processes that they would be doing, in the real work of celebrancy. And so it's amazing. It's so amazing to kind of walk beside so many different people from so many different parts of the world who've come at celebrancy from so many different ways. And we opened it out. It began as just for OBOD members, but now it's open to all.
Oh, is it? Okay, great.
And it continues to bubble along quite merrily. It just seems to have been quite constant, the interest ever since we began.
Oh, wonderful. So now your other work, which I think is really interesting, because you mentioned today you had done a funeral, and that's how my training with you was working with the living and the dead. So what's that like for you now? And just describe it. Is this your main celebrancy work, or do you do weddings and other?
I do them all. I do all of the things, whatever I'm asked to do within reason, really. But the bulk of my work is funerals. That weddings tend to be, a handful in a year, and maybe naming, one or two here or there. But funerals is the bulk of the celebrancy work that I do, and it's just such an incredible privilege, every time to hear people's stories, and to celebrate people's lives, and just to, I think we were talking about this at the last School of Celebrancy drop-in. Actually, we had a lovely little meeting of just sort of four of us women, and we were just talking about this this work of celebrancy. Somebody described it as being like a chaperone, and someone else as being like a midwife. But it's this sort of, you're walking along beside people, at these transformative moments, and obviously that's particularly intensive, around the time of a loss and a death, and you're being somebody that brings a sort of sense of peace, of being at peace with that, and in a normal space with that, so for everyone that I deal with, they're thrust wildly out of their normal, and I'm, it's normal for me to be present with that, and I can hopefully, help people to just feel safe and held and supported through that process of saying farewell.
I think it's because I've only done a few funerals. I did one last year for a friend who was 104. He was in my tango class. We were dancing on television when he was still 103.
Wow.
And I do lots. It's mostly weddings. In the UK, you have lots of time. So if somebody passes and they say, "Will you do the funeral?" then you could have 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 4 weeks before you do the funeral. Here, it's been 3 days. So if you're doing something else, you'd have to cancel everything. So, but just comparing the space holding of when you're doing a wedding and the space holding you're doing when it's a funeral, and how people are carrying way more with a funeral, because a wedding will carry itself many ways on its own.
Yes.
own energy, because people are here. This is a joyful thing. I always say, don't expect this to be the happiest day of your life. If you are, you're setting the bar very low, because people get set up. This is the happiest day, so it has to be perfect, and that puts a lot of stress. But there's a buoyancy there that happens with if the couple have nice friends and nice family,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it can carry itself. But with the funeral, because of grief, it is so important, the holding that the family has. It's
Mhm.
um, and I just, my heart goes out to people whose loved ones passed during COVID. Where either they passed
Mm.
or they weren't allowed to attend a funeral, or they couldn't see them. In Ireland, we see the body. It's very,
Yeah.
very important. Um, and I know what happened to me when Howard passed. So that was 10 years ago. He died at home, and I laid him out, and we had the funeral here. He was waked in this room, and his funeral ceremony was in our grove, and he's buried
Mm.
next door. All of that worked and held by OBOD members, fellow Druids,
Mm.
but how important that is to hold, and what a sacred job it is, that holding. Uh,
Mm.
of,
And my heart goes out as well to all these people now who are opting for the direct cremation, because it's so it's the affordable alternative now, and it's more. I don't know if it's happening in Ireland, but certainly here
Not that I'm
in
aware of. It would be very
in
small
in,
if it is.
in Britain, it's on the rise. It's on the rise that people are opting for this thing called direct cremation, which means that, okay, I'll choose this cheapest option, which means that it's unattended. They won't be told what day or time it's going to be, even. They might be told what day, but not what time, so no one can go. And, I think some of those people, they may do a wake, they may, a few might, I've had a few people who've had direct cremations and then have engaged me to do something at a different time, another time. But I think more and more people are just not getting that holding now, and not having that transition held, which is, I see it sort of horrifying to you, Eimear. Yeah.
Because I know we say people who've migrants have come from other cultures because of war, whatever, they fled here and sought asylum, and they've left loved ones behind, and they haven't been able to do the proper burial rites, and the impact that has on people's mental health and their spiritual well-being, and as a result on their physical well-being, and not being able to tend to the burial rituals or the funeral rites from
Mm,
our various cultures. We do funerals well here. I think the way we did Howard was much better than because it was Howard and I prepared it, you
yeah.
know, and it was in keeping with his wishes. And it blew a lot of people away, because most of the people who came were Catholics, and
Mm,
they'd never been at a funeral in someone's garden before,
yeah.
and blown away by it.
Yeah.
Um, and when you can't attend to that, it works on many different levels. It's not
Mm,
just paying respect to the dead person, but it's part of saying goodbye. It's a part of processing it.
yeah.
Um, having conversations about telling. One of the things that helped me when my grandfather died and my father died, and subsequently when Howard died, was telling stories, listening to the stories about them, and discovering things I didn't know before. Those kind of things, you can't plan that. And
Mm,
funerals, having a funeral or some kind of ritual, the occasion is a space for so many things.
yeah. Mm.
And Sandy says, who was a gatekeeper at camps,
Hi, Sandy.
from Tintagel, I would end up crying with the loved ones at the funeral. I hate the idea of direct cremation. It seems to disconnect people from the emotions of death.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And I do
Mm,
think if we don't mourn something, it doesn't go away. You know,
yeah.
it, um, it comes out in some other way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mm,
I
yeah.
can hear people in the background.
I'm sorry about that. That's my very loud husband. Anyone who's met him is actually in the downstairs and in the back on the other side of the
As
house.
far
But
away as possible.
it's as
Okay.
far away as I can be from him, but he's still kind of making himself heard.
Well, say
Let's
hello
just
to him for all of us.
let's just all be grateful he's not watching football, because then you really would hear him.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, he's chatting with our lovely lodger. Yeah.
Karen, I think Karen's in the New Forest, said, "Yes, I was at a celebration of life recently, but the family brought the ashes with them. It was very nice, and the stories of their life and the missing bits of the jigsaw." And I think that is those missing pieces that we don't all know everything. We don't have the complete picture of the person. And it's
Mm.
often at occasions like this that we begin to find those extra little bits. And I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the sign of a good funeral actually is or at the best funerals you do hear everyone hears something that they didn't know. Everyone discovers
That's right.
something that they didn't know about the person. I think and that can be even the kind of nearest and dearest, because we all have sort of different sides of ourselves that we have shared with different people, and at different times in our lives. And yeah, it's lovely to kind of bring all of that together. Yeah, it was a beautiful place, the funeral that I did today. It was Clayton Woods. It's one of the natural burial grounds, where they're growing lots of trees and the land's just being so well cared for and tended. And we, as part of the process, there's a little, what they call it, rather grandly called the Oak Hall, but beautiful traditional oak framed, little kind of, I think they didn't want to call it a chapel, it's just
Okay.
a little oak hall where the services are held, and with great big bifold glass windows looking out at the South Downs, looking down over this beautiful kind of meadow with the trees. They're all kind of young saplings now of sort of 10, 20 years old. And we, then walked down to the graveside, and on the way down today we all went past a sort of magical family of Canada geese with both parents, 7 little goslings. Just it's so lovely to be able to
That's beautiful.
conduct a ceremony somewhere like that.
Carol Ann says, "Hi River, I was the chapel attendant at Worthington Crematorium and have done the OBOT course. I'm retired now, but my fellow celebrants are reporting a massive increase in mental health issues in the bereaved. Folk arrange directs, thinking they're saving family a problem, but in fact the ritual is absolutely necessary." Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And actually, having this conversation sort of, is fanning a little flame, that's one of my little, we've all got this little back burner full of little candles that need a little bit of tending, a little spark. But to do, I don't know, some kind of, community outreach about this, and because it's, the reason that people opt for the direct cremation, I think the principal reason is financial, and because funerals are so expensive. But the cost of a celebrant is like usually, a fraction. It might be, it's usually less than 10% of the overall cost of what people might pay for a funeral. And so if they knew that they could have the best bit, for
And it's interesting how the celebrancy or having the ritual, which to me is the most important, and the others are the frills.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how you get the word out there, but absolutely.
Yeah.
And you see, funerals have always been expensive, though.
Mm-hmm.
Going way, way back, unless you had what was known as a pauper's burial, but you've always had to pay for the plot, or That actually, we were fortunate here. There's an old graveyard that was closed, but Dorothy Howard's first wife, they opened the grave for her because my garden opens into the graveyard, and this was a Church of Ireland rectory. So, so that meant because she was there, then Howard could be buried there. And so, if you family there, you can be buried. But digging a plot, getting it dug, all of that, the coffin and all of that stuff can be so expensive. And then there's this thing about if you care about your loved one, you'll have the most expensive coffin, and you will have the most expensive hotel and all that stuff that goes on with it. But you
Yes.
can. We had it here, and people brought food. Well, this is the Irish thing. People brought food, but people in Ireland, people turn up and they bring food to a funeral, and then others still do it in a hotel or a pub. But Simone says, my ex-partner died recently and I was not welcome at the funeral. It made me realise how unbearable it would be not to have this ritual. Fortunately, I was allowed to view it by live stream. I'm so sorry, Simone. That is really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, go on.
Yeah, I was just about to say, just about my experience of, we talked about the difference between the Irish way and the English way, and I've also got quite a lot of experience of an Indonesian way, Batak way. So my loud husband is a Batak from North Sumatra.
Okay.
And so yeah, I've been to quite a few funerals there. It's also a kind of 3-day thing there, but the funeral goes on for that 3 days. It's all a kind of funeral rite. But that isn't the only time that the community come together. In his tribe, there's something that happens a couple of weeks after, and then there's something that happens a few months after, and there are these various points at which the community gather, around the family and support them. So yeah, it's in real kind of contrast to what happens here. Well, there's no, I'm hopefully in many cases people do still get support from their community, and it's always one of the things that I kind of encourage, and just remind people of thank them for all the support that's just remind them that support's going to be needed ongoing too.
Absolutely, because life goes on and people get on and pick up where they left off, and then the bereaved are left dealing with it. We have traditionally, this would be well, certainly with Catholics, and I was grown up with this, is that we have a month's mind. So 4 weeks after the funeral, after the person has died, you then have a mass and people gather again. And then every year, if say my mother would have a mass for my father every year, and people gather for that. So there's always that reminding.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, I think we need those. I think we need those moments as well, just to for the immediate bereaved, it's that support, isn't it? And recognition and holding by the wider community.
What helped me when Howard died was people talking about Howard and how much they missed him. And some would say, I dreamt about him last night. And I found that really reassuring. And people would remember and say, oh, I've got, because he published 2 books on poetry in his last 6 weeks. And people say, oh, I love that. And they would talk about, and that always reassured me. And I remember when I lived in Kenya, in Turkana, in the north of Kenya, and it was believed there that as long as people spoke about you, you weren't actually dead.
Yeah.
And that notion of the tribe is those who are here, those who've passed over, and those who are yet to be born. Yes. And there's that cycle, and that the connection between this world and the other world.
Yes.
And as long as you're named and people remember you, then you are still alive in people's hearts.
Yeah.
And I found that when my father died, that was really reassuring.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, some of those African cultures have the griots, don't they? Who are the
In West
storytellers and
Africa.
musicians and the keepers of the ancestral stories. And so, yeah, they will recite the names of the ancestors going back generations, as part of that song, and it's another thing that that often sort of comes up, in the very important kind of closing words in a funeral, where it's just a few moments at the end, but you can kind of set up those signposts. One of them might be, continuing to pass down the stories to
Yes.
the little ones that are present, or maybe the generations yet to come. Yeah.
Beautiful. Gabriella, I don't know if you're from Romania or Poland. I can't, forgive me for having forgotten this, but she says, see, she said, here we have food offerings at particular timings, 40 days after, a few months after, a year after. That is beautiful. Done in the name of the person who crossed. See, that's different. When my great grandmother passed away, I was 6. I would talk about her all the time with love and joy, which would make my nana, her daughter, cry as she missed her. And we are all so unique with unique needs. Um, that's what's different. So
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah,
So,
that's lovely.
and then Simone says, Simone, I love the film Coco about the Mexican Day of the Dead, which says that the people are only really dead when people stop remembering them. Yeah.
Yeah. Is anyone? Is it bothersome? Do you think this noise that I realise now that they're in the kitchen beneath me washing up, having a sort of
No,
chilled
I
moment?
could hear it on and off. It was only when I
Okay.
mentioned it was a bit louder. Anyway, have you got a poem? Because we're gonna end soon anyway. But one of your
Okay.
own poems.
I do have a poem, and it kind of comes back around to your first question to me, which is about describing where I live. And yeah, the poem that I wanted to share was, I suppose, urban druid poem. So it's about,
Lovely.
yeah, the seaside, living by the sea, and it's called Grandmother Ocean. The Huichol people of the Sierra Madre call the ocean grandmother and say she likes offerings of candles and chocolate. From my door to the nearest wild place, 6 city streets to reach your shore. Red Burger King flags proclaim the edge of the beach. You're on the turn, not apparently approaching or retreating, shushing under low cloud light as skeins of starlings scarf the pier. Extraordinary how the rhythms of our in and out are so close. So similarly spaced. It seems we really are related. You who reach to touch all times, all places on this earth, and I, only a fragment of a tiny moment here, yet in my body, moon-pulled tides in keeping with your own. I tell you my name. A spotlight at the far end of the pier winks on, pretend moon track to where you meet me here. Doubtless, my grandmothers stood along these shores, felt their kinship, called you Nana. What offerings did they bring for you? What prayers? They say that when your distant edge shows dark and sharp, tomorrow will bring rain. So what does it mean when, after I call you, horizon erupts, a streak of dazzling sparks?
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Did you write that? When did you write that?
I wrote it, I think it was maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. It was a year that I made a New Year's resolution to go and be with the sea at least once a week. Because, it's 5 minute cycle ride, 12 minutes walk, 15 minutes walk from my house, but weeks can go by without me necessarily going and spending time, and I just made a point to go every day, every week through the year.
Wonderful. Gabriella says it's so interesting how River holds space for each word and segment in the poem, holding their energy and allowing for it to radiate. Absolutely. So lots of reactions to your poem. Beautifully read.
Yeah. I do love to read a poem, my own or anyone else's.
Well, you do a very good job. It's been such a joy talking to you, and it's so long since I've seen you, and it seems like 100 years. But anyway, long before COVID, and then of course we did have a little chat online. But in terms of, as my daughter used to say, in real. So thank you so much for joining me, and it's been a really, really interesting chat. I knew it would be. And so I'll allow you to say goodbye to everybody.
Oh, thank you so much, Eimear, for letting me warm my bones by your fireside. And yeah, thanks everyone for your lovely, kind words and comments. And yeah, maybe we'll do that celebrants retreat again one day after all. It's all very lovely doing the online courses, but yeah, I would just like to sort of plant that little seed of
Plant that
some
seed.
celebrants together in the real world too
I
one
think
day.
that would be lovely. I think that would be really, really lovely.
Yeah.
Anyway, I will send you through the veil. Stay on and we can just look at the comments. So I'll see you in a moment. So thank you all so much for joining us. And I hope you enjoyed our chat. I certainly did. And I just wish you a good evening, good afternoon, good night, good morning, or if you're watching a recording of this. And I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, have a beautiful Bealtaine, which is coming up next weekend, I think. Yep. And may your life be full of abundance and flourishing, and may your gardens not explode too much behind you like mine is doing at the moment. But anyway, that's always that challenge. I love it, but then it just conspires against me. It just takes over like a jungle. But anyway, I wish you all the best things of Bealtaine, and may you be held in those two polarities, and may you be warmth between the two fires, and may you be cleansed and held, and may you discover wonderful creativity within yourself and within your being. So until we meet again, slán go fóill.